Boris Johnson received resounding support in the House of Commons as he mocked Jeremy Corbyn during Prime Minister's questions over his claim the UK is failing to meet targets to combat climate change. The Labour Party leader confronted the Prime Minister on former environmental advisor Claire O'Neill's claim Boris Johnson doesn't get climate change and has failed to keep his promises on the issue. Mr. Corbyn said, "This country isn't meeting its targets and it isn't due to meet its target. I think the Prime Minister should recognise that. Even the Paris targets are not enough. The UN says we have just a decade to change course if we want to avoid a climate catastrophe." After quoting the damning letter Ms. O'Neill wrote to the Prime Minister on Tuesday, Mr. Corbyn asked, what on earth could she have been talking about, but Boris Johnson was quick to turn the Labour leader's comment on its head. He blasted, "Mr. Speaker, as so often I'm not entirely sure what the right honourable gentleman is talking about, because if you look at what this government has actually done and delivered, if you look at our conservative policy of backing green tech, backing innovation and supporting a dynamic market economy which is the solution to these problems, we have cut CO2 emissions in this country since 2010 by 42%. That is an astonishing achievement and at the same time, the economy has grown by 73% thanks to free market, dynamic, one-nation conservatism." Claire O'Neill, who was fired last week, claimed Mr. Johnson had admitted that he does not really understand the issue and accused him of breaking promises. The row overshadowed a climate crisis event at London's Science Museum, attended by Sir David Attenborough, with Mr. Johnson refusing to answer questions on the dispute with Mrs. O'Neill. She was booted out as president of the COP26 UN summit, which will be held in Glasgow in November, by the Prime Minister's special advisor, Dominic Cummings. The former Tory energy minister, who quit Parliament at the election, said there had been a huge lack of leadership on climate change. She told BBC Radio 4's Today programme, "The Prime Minister has made incredibly warm statements about this over the years. He also admitted to me that he doesn't really understand it. He doesn't really get it, I think is what he said." She added, "My advice to anybody to whom Boris is making promises, whether it is voters, world leaders, ministers, employees or indeed family members, is to get it in writing, get a lawyer to look at it and make sure the money is." Mrs. O'Neill spoke out as the government unveiled plans for the ban on sales of new petrol and diesel vehicles, including hybrids, to be brought forward by 5 years to 2035. The Prime Minister told the launch that he wants to see every country following the UK's lead in setting credible targets to reach net zero emissions. He added, "We've put so much CO2 in the atmosphere collectively that the entire planet is swaddled in a tea cozy of the stuff. It's predicted, unless we take urgent action, to get 3°C hotter, and in the hurricanes and the bushfires and melting of the ice caps and the acidification of the oceans, the evidence is now overwhelming. We know as a country, as a planet, as a species, we must act." The Prime Minister said the UK was leading the way by setting a legal goal to reach net zero by 2050, saying, "It's quite proper that we should, we were the first after all, to industrialise. Look at historic emissions of the UK, we have a responsibility to our planet to lead in this way."